Good morning, and welcome to another edition of the Daily Sovereignty Briefing. My name is Aaron Thomas. Hauhitan is my hereditary name. We made it. Weekend's over. Now we got to start a great week here on Monday, July 2026. And we're here giving you all the great updates around Indian country up in Canada, here in the United States. Before I go further, please do what you can to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your CMs, your family, your relatives, your friends, and make sure that we continue to leverage each other's relationships to bring some of the greatest information and updates around any country directly to their cell phone or to their desktop. Remember that you can find me on any platforms, on Apple, on Amazon, on Spotify, etc. You can actually get the audio version, so you don't have to see the video version of this great podcast. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Today, according to Indian Country Today, the Swinomish and Squaxin Island tribes up in the Pacific Northwest have joined a lawsuit challenging changes to Federal Endangered Species Act regulations. The tribes argue that rule changes could undermine recovery efforts for Chinook salmon protected under treaty tribal rights. Now, why does this matter? Salmon support tribal culture, food systems, and local economies, and from a sovereignty perspective, treaty fishing rights depend on healthy salmon populations. Protecting salmon means protecting treaty rights. And in other news today, according to Native News Online, a leader from the Bay Mills Indian community is criticizing federal and state consultation processes tied to the Line 5 pipeline and Great Lakes Tunnel project, arguing that tribal nations are consulted but not meaningfully included in the final decisions. Now, why does this matter? Pipeline projects can impact treaty rights protected waters, fisheries, and sacred places. And for sovereignty, meaningful consultation is a fundamental part of tribal self-determination and government-to-government relationships. Now, turning our attention to federal policy updates, Native vote rights debate continues. According to Native News Online, Native voting rights advocates are raising concerns about renewed federal support for the SAVE Act. Critics argue that the legislation could create additional barriers for some Native voters by requiring documentary proof of citizenship during voter registration. Now, why does this matter? Voting access affects representation and policy outcomes, and for sovereignty, political participation remains an important tool tribes use to protect treaty rights and strengthen relationships with federal and state governments. All right, for our friends up in Canada, north of the border, Indigenous rights and resource development, First Nations challenge fast-track development plans, according to reporting by the CBC News and other Canadian media covering the Assembly of First Nations Annual General Assembly. AFN chiefs have voted to oppose federal project approval reforms if those reforms weaken environmental protections, consultation requirements, or Indigenous rights. Leaders emphasize that development timelines cannot override First Nations rights. Now, why does this matter? Major resource and infrastructure projects frequently cross Indigenous territories. For sovereignty, the debate centers on free, prior, and informed consent and Indigenous authority in decision-making. And in water sovereignty this morning, Great Lakes protection remains a key issue. According to Native News Online, concerns surrounding the Line 5 pipeline continue to focus on the protection of Great Lakes waters and treaty-protected fishing resources. Now, why does this matter? Clean water supports public health, fishing, transportation, and culture. For sovereignty, water stewardship is directly connected to treaty rights and Indigenous responsibilities to future generations. All right, this morning's deep dive in energy infrastructure and utility sovereignty. According to the United States Department of Energy's Office of Indian Energy, a $50 million funding initiative continues to support tribal-led energy planning, infrastructure, construction, project development, and expanded electricity across Indian country. This funding helps tribes build energy systems based on community priorities. And according to Native News Online's Washington, D.C. briefs, federal officials announced changes to future review procedures for Medicaid and CHIP waivers. The publication reports that tribal consultation requirements remain unchanged, but review timelines may be longer moving forward. Now, why does this matter? Longer review timelines could affect implementation of federal serving tribal communities, and for sovereignty, strong tribal health systems are essential to healthy and thriving tribal nations. And turning our attention to workforce development, there's a tech sovereignty and AI economy, according to the National Congress of American Indians. A webinar titled Tech Sovereignty, a Tribal Leader's Guide to the AI Era will take place this week on July 22nd. Now, why does this matter? Artificial intelligence and digital technologies are becoming major workforce sectors, and for sovereignty, tribes are increasingly focused on Indigenous control of data, digital infrastructure, and emerging technologies. In tribal sports today, Michigan Indian Family Olympics were impacted by smoke. According to Indian Country Today, smoke from Canadian wildfires disrupted the Michigan Indian Family Olympics, forcing postponements and changes to scheduled events. Tribal sports themselves, those programs, they strengthen community connections, wellness, and youth engagement. For sovereignty, these events are expressions of tribal identity and resilience. And in tribal Hollywood and Indigenous arts, Indigenous storytelling continues to grow. According to Native News Online and Indian Country Today, Indigenous artists, musicians, filmmakers, and cultural leaders continue gaining visibility through Native-led programs and creative initiatives, including opportunities connected to Spokane Falls Community College's Native Artist in Residence program. Now, why does this matter? Indigenous creators are telling Indigenous stories in their own voices, and for sovereignty, control over storytelling and representation is a powerful form of cultural self-determination. All right, for this morning's severe weather and environmental impacts, we talked earlier about the Great Lakes smoke emergency. According to Indian Country Today, wildfire smoke from Canada continues impacting tribal communities throughout Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, and portions of New York. The publication reports hazardous air quality conditions affecting tribal services and community events. The greatest health risks are facing elders, children, and people with respiratory illness. And according to updates from the Superior National Forest, wildfire activity continues across northern Minnesota, prompting evacuations, monitoring efforts, and active emergency response operations. And according to Native News Online, major wildfires continue affecting First Nations communities all across Canada, leading to evacuations and expanded Indigenous-led wildfire response programs. Meanwhile, Indigenous Service Canada reports that multiple First Nations also remain affected by active wildfires and ongoing evacuations. So please, everybody, please be safe up there. We know that Indigenous-led fire stewardship is increasingly recognized as an important tool for land management and climate resilience. All right, upcoming events for this morning, according to the National Congress of American Indians, as stated earlier, the tribal leaders can participate in July 22nd's webinar titled Tech Sovereignty, a Tribal Leaders Guide to AI Era. Also on July 22nd, according to NCAI's events calendar, the Native Farm Bill Coalition will host a webinar discussing the Senate Farm Bill discussion draft. And according to the United States Department of Energy, applications remain open for the Tribal Energy Development Funding Initiative. All right, you guys, that'll do it for me this morning. The big takeaway today is that Indigenous nations continue asserting sovereignty in courtrooms, legislatures, and treaty territories while expanding leadership in energy development, technology, environmental stewardship, and cultural revitalization. If you found this briefing helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to my podcast. Every share helps expand awareness of tribal sovereignty, treaty rights, and Indigenous perspectives. And if you're listening, you can also find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite platform. Please leave a rating or review. It also helps other people to discover Indigenous news and stories that matter. Again, thank you for joining me. My name is Aaron Thomas. Hauhitan is my hereditary name. Thank you for joining me. We'll see you again tomorrow morning on another Daily Sovereignty Briefing.